Definers, we know Amazon is known for speed and scale, but did you know that same approach now drives their sustainability efforts? Guided by data and science and powered by invention, Amazon works backwards from ambitious targets to drive measurable progress. Amazon has delivered 1.5 billion packages by electric delivery vehicles globally. They're also building the largest carbon-free energy portfolio of any corporation globally, with over 700 carbon-free energy projects worldwide. Every delivery and every data center is an opportunity to move forward, and you can learn more at sustainability.aboutamazon.com.
Welcome to episode 100 of Sustainability Defined. That's right, episode 100. Can you believe it, Netra?
Woo! I cannot believe it, Cecilia.
Crazy. I mean, it's been almost a year since Netra and I released our first episodes as the new host. But if you are a new definer, you may not know that Scott Breen and Jay Siegel are actually the creators of Sustainability Defined. They started this podcast almost 10 years ago now. So shout out to Scott and Jay, and shout out to the whole Sustainability Defined team for making the podcast what it is today.
Yes, a huge thank you to Keaton, our sound engineer, Sarah, our social media manager, of course, Scott and Jay, the creators, and you definers. If you're an OG definer, thank you for listening for over a decade. And if you're new to the family, we appreciate you. But for our OGs, you'll probably find these voices familiar.
Hey, Scott, it's Jay. Are you there?
I'm here.
Scott, oh my gosh, it's so good to hear your voice.
Yeah.
Can you believe we're reconnecting on the 100th episode of Sustainability Defined?
No, it feels like just yesterday we were doing our first one on electric bikes.
With Amber Wasson
Yes.
in my apartment around our kitchen island. That's exactly right.
I know. It's crazy. I guess I didn't really think about it when we started of like, how many episodes will this become? We just thought, let's give it a go.
Let's go for it. And then, of course, I think my mind would wander and say, how many could we reach? But then I would always kind of pull myself back and say, well, we're once a month. These episodes are very research intensive. They require a lot of coordination. So eventually that thought left my mind, but holy cannoli, here we are at the centennial.
Yeah, and we couldn't have done it without the definers. So thank you all. But also Cecilia and Nethra, because Jay, you and I, we just had other things to do, as much as we love being Sustainability Defined co-hosts. But
of course,
they have been, I'm still listening. I know you are too. And it's just, it's fun to just have that in my podcast feed every month, to hear from them. I love all the Wicked references, the song cutaways. They're just, they make me smile, and we learn along the way. And that's exactly the combo you and I were hoping for when we started this thing.
Absolutely. And for me, it's two things. Number one, you and I both went through our own growth together on the podcast. And I think that becomes more evident as our rapport developed over time. But you can already see that in Nathan and Cecilia too. I mean, just the relationship that they've developed really not only on the air, but off the air, I think you can feel as a listener. And of course, we're lucky because this is exactly how I think we dreamed it up when we were thinking about what to do with the podcast next, to say, you know what, let's hand this off to another, set of capable hands that could maybe reinvigorate this in a new way and keep it going. And by George, that's exactly what's happening.
And we didn't know each other before really starting this. They didn't know each other before becoming co-hosts. So the podcast is bringing people together and educating people, entertaining them. So yeah, here's to 100 episodes. Thanks to everyone for doing that. And hopefully the bad jokes continue here. Hopefully you're making bad jokes in your non-podcast life, everybody. And Jay, let's talk about the non-podcast life. What do you got going on?
Yeah, well, a few things. My kid is now approaching 2 years old, and we've had so much fun with number one that Anna and I are expecting number two this fall.
Whoa,
so
exciting.
That is very exciting, very time consuming, very sleep depriving, but it is phenomenal. And I'm also, back on the professional side, kind of looking at standing up my own next venture in real estate that, if folks are on LinkedIn will become more clear as time goes on. But all kinds of things to keep me busy around the clock, Scott, on my end. How about you?
Well, first of all, when Nathan and Cecilia do sustainable babies, can they come to you?
Yeah, look, they'll have their first guest. He'll be about 2 years old. He'll say no for most of the questions he's asked, but I'm sure he would love to sit in front of the microphone and talk into it before he destroys it.
It's funny because apparently my nephew, my brother's son, he says yes to everything. Like he's like 2.
Wow.
I'd be like, Archie, you want to go to the store? Yep.
What's his number?
2. Oh, his phone number? Yeah, to talk to yours and give him a little advice? Sure. We can get him connected.
Yeah, but 2 remains correct.
Yes. So what's going on with me is that Shannon and I moved to Annapolis, Maryland.
Yeah.
So it's fun to own a house, although you also have to fix everything, which I'm not very handy. So, talk to more than one contractor. I think that's the main lesson I learned. Always get a second opinion. And then, became president of Can Manufacturers Institute. So I've been very busy with that. Honestly, more tariffs stuff than sustainability stuff.
Very awesome. Congratulations again.
Thank you. So those are the big updates here. And Jay, fun to talk to you here, but of course it's just fun being friends with you generally. And thanks to everyone again. 100 episodes. I'm excited for many more.
Oh, same. Okay, Scott, maybe we can reconnect at 200. I wonder where we'll be at our lives at that point.
Maybe our kids can be sitting there and joining.
I love it.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, Scott, always a pleasure. Let's get this back to the people that everyone is now tuning in to hear.
You all stay sustainable out there. I'm Scott Breen.
I'm Jay Siegel. We'll see you at 200.
Sounds good. Bye.
Wow, what a special moment and a little special recording for our 100th episode. We're so thankful to have Scott and Jay's voices back on the podcast, even for a little bit. And for this episode, we are bringing back the Hot Commodities series. Today, we're breaking down a notorious nut in everyone's pantries, peanuts.
Peanut butter jelly time! Way yeah.
Throwback.
What a silly song to start us off, Nathan. It really reminds me of my elementary school YouTube days, to be honest. But this episode, we're talking about peanuts, but specifically peanut butter, as it is the most commonly enjoyed version of this commodity. It's a simple product most of us grew up with, but behind every jar is a much bigger story. In this episode, we're unpacking how peanuts go from raw commodity to finished product, the environmental challenges tied to peanut production, and how companies are rethinking sustainability within the food industry.
And then to answer some of our burning questions and give us more insight into a company that's doing it right is Sudheer Kosaraju from Once Again, the #1 natural nut butter brand. So Once Again is joining us to basically set the stage for sustainable and ethical peanut and other nut butter production. And they've been doing it since 1976, actually, so they've been walking the walk for a while. The company has created their own sustainability program called Honest in Trade and uses organic, non-GMO ingredients, promotes agricultural practices that are rooted in sustainability, and of course, they support local and international agricultural communities through their employee-owned cooperative. But we're going to hear a ton about this later.
I'm going nuts to get this episode started, Netra. But before we dive into raw materials, I want to leave you definers with a question to carry through this episode. Why does sustainability matter when it comes to peanut butter, and what problems are we actually looking to solve? All right, let's start with the source, nuts. Peanuts are an interesting commodity because it's a cultural icon here in America. I mean, a PB&J, come on, you heard the song. Also, a peanut moment at the ballpark, she's iconic.
Well, I grew up in Georgia, so for me, it's boiled Cajun peanuts on the side of the road all day. And of course, I can't ignore a good Reese's cup.
Can't do that. And quick apologies to our allergy folks out there. This commodity is not for you.
Not for you, sorry.
It's like when you're in elementary school and they had the peanut table. I don't mean to laugh. But for a lot of us, It's a childhood memory. It's a late night snack. It's a gym protein. It's also a wartime ration and a $1 billion commodity. But here's the thing, peanut butter is the end product. The raw material is the peanut, which is not inherently unsustainable to grow. So the question in this episode becomes, at what point does a commodity start losing its sustainable qualities?
Right. Let's start unpacking that question by setting the scene for peanut production itself. The peanut story actually starts in South America. Wild peanuts originated in what's now Bolivia and northeastern Argentina, and the cultivated species, Arachnis hypogea, dates back to pre-Columbian times.
Ooh, mi gente latina, as J-Lo would say.
See, I didn't think peanuts were Latina. I thought she was more of a Southern belle.
I don't know, Netra. Crazy to think about the global movement of crops, no? They're kind of everywhere.
Truly. And what's more interesting about peanuts are the plant itself. So peanuts don't grow the way people think they do. I don't even know what I thought peanuts grew like, but definitely not this. The plant flowers above ground, but after fertilization, the flower stalk actually bends downward and pushes into the soil. And that's where peanut pods develop and mature underground. So the peanuts you know today are grown and developed, again, completely underground.
What a peculiar plant. But I guess, Nathan, now that you mention it, I don't know what I imagined peanuts would grow like either. Like, I guess it makes sense that they're underground.
Nah, if you think peanuts are crazy, definers, on your own time, look up what a cashew looks like in the wild.
Ooh, for me, it was pineapples. Pineapples blew my mind.
Very peculiar indeed.
Okay.
The entire growing cycle takes about 4 to 5 months for a peanut, and they bloom these very pretty yellow flowers. And they became quite popular. Peanuts spread across continents. But before we get to how they came to America, it's worth asking, why? Why did peanuts travel so far and so successfully in the first place?
Right, because not every crop makes that kind of journey. Peanuts had a few things going for them. They are incredibly calorie dense and protein rich, which made them an ideal food source for long sea voyages and for feeding large populations. They also store and travel well once dried, which was a huge advantage in an era before refrigeration.
And from an agricultural standpoint, peanuts are relatively adaptable, right? They can grow in poor, sandy soils where other crops struggle to grow. And this made them extremely attractive to farmers and colonizers looking to cultivate land that wasn't prime farmland. They also thrive in warm climates, which meant large parts of Africa, Asia, and eventually North America were very viable growing regions.
So you have this crop that feeds people well, survives the journey well, grows in tough conditions, and fits into warm climates across multiple continents. Portuguese and Spanish traders are largely credited with spreading peanuts from South America into Africa and Asia during the 16th century. And from there, they became deeply embedded in cuisines and agricultural systems around the world.
They made their way into the United States through Africa, but for a long time, peanuts were not considered a major crop here in the US.
That is until cotton started failing Southern farmers. Farmers needed an alternative cash crop when this cotton started failing. And peanuts stepped up into that role because they are that diva.
Step up, step up.
I mean, maybe they are a Southern belle, Nathra,
Yeah.
actually.
They knew what had to be done.
Yeah, but honestly, in all seriousness, that shift is probably where we begin to see the movement from relatively sustainable cultivation to large-scale, mass-produced industrial production.
So, peanuts themselves are not necessarily the environmental villain here. In fact, peanuts can actually be beneficial agriculturally since they're legumes and they help fix nitrogen in the soil. But peanuts are also kind of divas, okay.
Agricultural divas.
Truly, they need very specific balance. Long, warm growing seasons, okay. Steady rainfall, and precise timing. And too dry, well, these divas' yields are about to collapse. And too wet, you better believe harvesting becomes difficult and plants will get root rot. So even soil temperatures at planting have to be just right for them.
How were people doing this in the 16th century, Nathra?
I don't know how they figured it out.
And there's another consequence of getting those conditions wrong that most people and I had never heard of before. Aflatoxins. Nathra, could you step in here?
Yes, aflatoxins are toxic compounds produced by a mold called Aspergillus, and this grows on peanuts when they're stressed. Again, divas. Usually brought on by drought or extreme heat, which sounds like a result of climate change.
Oh, no.
And the scary part is you cannot see, smell, or taste these aflatoxins.
Ugh, yuck. They are also one of the most potent naturally occurring carcinogens known, and they're a serious food safety concern globally. The US actually has pretty strict testing regulations, but in lower income countries where testing infrastructure is limited, aflatoxin contamination in peanuts is a significant public health issue.
And here's where it connects back to sustainability. I hinted at this before, but as climate change makes more droughts and more frequent temperature extremes, it really puts a threat on peanut growing regions. The conditions that very much trigger aflatoxin growth are going to become more common. So this is not just a yield problem, it's a food safety problem too.
And that's exactly why climate disruption becomes such a big issue for peanut production and frankly all the commodities, Nathra, that we've talked about. But rising temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, drought stress, and extreme weather events could make many peanut growing regions far more unstable in the future. And despite all this complexity, peanut butter somehow became one of the most casually consumed foods in America. I mean, I would say even like the pantry staple.
Absolutely. Whenever I think about peanut butter, for some reason, I always think about that scene in The Parent Trap.
I knew you were going to say Parent Trap. Okay,
yes. That scene where she puts the peanut butter on the Oreo and they're like, we're twins.
Low-key, a fire combination. They were onto something. So yum. Have you tried it before?
To this day, I have not. And I always think about it every time I watch the movie.
Nathra, you literally, when we get off this call, you're dipping an Oreo in a peanut butter jar. You have to.
I'm about
once
to.
Again, peanut butter.
I have
Yeah.
once again in my pantry, so I'm about to do that.
Period. Me too. It's so good.
Well, going back to what we were talking about, this is actually where peanut butter starts to get interesting from a sustainability perspective. Because when most people think about that iconic jar of peanut butter, they picture just simple ground up peanuts in a jar. Minimal, healthy, clean. But the environmental story becomes much more complicated when you zoom out and actually look at that full supply chain, as it always does.
As it always does. Starting at the farm level, peanut farming can require significant water use depending on the region, especially in drought-prone areas like parts of the southern United States, again, the Southern Belle. And while peanuts can improve soil health through nitrogen fixation, large-scale monocropping can still degrade biodiversity and soil quality over time, even though they contribute positively to soil health.
Right, because even though certain crops have benefits to the soil, when you monocrop, it does take out the natural biodiversity. It takes it off the table. One plant in mass amounts basically depletes and nourishes the soil in one specific way, which throws off the balance that you need, that homeostasis that occurs naturally in the environment. So if you have multiple crops growing in areas that they complement each other, or at minimum practice crop rotation, it actually replenishes the soil.
Right. It's like if you only ever ate one thing for the rest of your life and you were supposed to get all your nutrients
Exactly.
from just that one food item. Like, that's crazy. You need diversity here, okay?
Absolutely.
But anyway, that is why we are huge fans of agroforestry and polyculture here on the podcast. And we always ask our industry expert guests when they talk about Hot Commodities about what they think about agroforestry and how they've seen it practiced. It's always interesting to learn about things like that. But moving along to peanut processing, turning peanuts into shelf-stable peanut butter takes energy, manufacturing, infrastructure, roasting, grinding, emulsifying, packaging, and transportation, all the things, all the stages, which are very energy intensive, as you know, if you've been listening to other episodes in the Hot Commodities series. And this is also where ingredients really start to matter, because natural peanut butter and conventional peanut butter are very different products. Many major brands add stabilizers, sugar, salt, oils, sometimes even palm oil, to prevent separation and extend shelf life.
I know. And I know I said I love Reese's, but low-key that thing barely has any peanuts in it.
Rip.
And I grew up on Jif peanut butter. And when I actually switched over to natural peanut butter when I entered my 20s, because I was more conscious of labels and ingredients, it tasted very different. And I had to get used to that. And speaking of palm oil, which is in a lot of major peanut brands today, I'm sure you guys have heard of it. It's one of those sustainability villains that are kind of notorious because it's been long associated with deforestation and habitat loss. And that sort of introduces another environmental conversation entirely, which we'll do in another episode, we promise.
Palm oil is totally a sustainability villain in my eye. But you know what's also a villain? Packaging. Okay? Plastic packaging. You can't forget about the plastic stage. Peanut butter mostly comes in plastic jars with plastic lids and plastic seals, creating another layer of waste in a product people rarely think, as being environmentally harmful.
And quick pause and recycling tip.
Yes, please, recycling queen.
I'm looking some of you directly in the eye when I say that you cannot take your crusty, oily peanut butter jar and toss it directly in the recycling bin. The no-nos to easily contaminate your recycling bin are what I like to call the 3 Fs: food, foam, and film. Don't put those in the bin. So pro tip, don't leave your excess nut butter in your jar and ruin the recycling stream. Take some warm oat milk or whatever you drink, shake it up in your jar, pour it into a cup with some chocolate syrup and espresso, and you just made yourself an upcycled peanut butter mocha.
Okay, Chef Nathra. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Gonna be trying
Don't
that
mess
out.
up my recycling stream.
No, okay. 3 Fs. Got it. Food, foam, and film. Taking that
Yes.
every day, applying it. So, yes, dear God, please stop putting food-covered things in the recycling bin. Anyway, back to the nuts. Transportation adds another layer too. Peanuts may be grown in one region, mainly the South, and processed in another, packaged elsewhere, and then shipped globally. Suddenly, peanut butter starts looking a lot less like just peanuts in a jar and more like a massive industrial system with environmental impacts showing up showing up at every single stage from production to waste. So back to our original question. At what point did this relatively sustainable crop become an unsustainable product?
I'd like to say somewhere between the peanut plant and the grocery store shelf.
Definitely.
So that's where things get complicated, and let's explore this. I mean, how did peanut butter become this massive industrial product?
Netra, I think it's time we get started with some theories here.
You know I love a theory. Let's get into it.
Here is my theory. Theory number 1. Peanut butter was marketed as a healthy alternative to meat. The story goes, modern peanut butter started with a man who was deeply anti-meat. His name was John Harvey Kellogg. Yes, that Kellogg. The cereal man. In 1895, he patented an early version of peanut butter at the Battle Creek Sanitarium, where he promoted bland, plant-based foods as a part of a very strict health philosophy.
And when Cecilia says strict, we mean strict.
So strict, like borderline crazy a little bit. The rumor is, and this is not even actually rumored, I read this off the Smithsonian magazine, but Kellogg believed meat was bad for digestion, bad for health, and apparently even a sinful sexual stimulant.
Fascinating. And he promoted peanut butter because it was clean, affordable, and a plant-based protein. And it makes sense because it was also shelf-stable, cheap, and easy to mass-produce. I mean, at the end of the day, he was a businessman.
Mm-hmm.
And
gotta give it to him.
He even had influencer marketing before it was influencer marketing.
Stop!
Had celebrity elite
so
clientele helping him promote peanut butter.
The A-listers.
Literally.
The Kim Kardashians of 1890s.
Amelia Earhart and Henry Ford, all who helped establish the product as a delicacy and eventually a household staple.
I mean, wow, the pre-war influencer marketing scheme is crazy.
And he knew what he was doing.
He did.
All of these benefits made peanuts and peanut butter especially attractive during periods like World War I and the Great Depression, when meat rationing and economic hardship was pushed and Americans were really forced to get these inexpensive calorie-dense foods. So during World War I, consumers, whether or not convinced by Kellogg's advice, had turned to peanut butter. The government even promoted pamphlets that read Meatless Mondays, with peanuts pretty high on that menu. So peanut butter wasn't originally sold as junk food or comfort food. It was sold as functional, multi-purpose nutrition. As a mainly plant-based girly myself, I kind of love this lore.
Love this lore for you, Nathra. And I have to add this in really quick. Like, every time I'm reading some, like American history lore, I guess, the government's always throwing pamphlets everywhere. Like, what is up with that? There was pamphlets for everything everywhere.
Bring a pamphlet back.
Right? There's so much media misinformation these days, but would you trust a government pamphlet?
I don't know what I trust anymore, Cecilia. Good question.
Yeah, you see, I don't think... Yeah, at least not this government pamphlet. But
No.
Anyway, we're going to move on to the Meatless Monday. Bring back the Meatless Mondays for America. But in all seriousness, during this time, peanut butter ran into a teeny tiny small problem. Since they are divas and all, they demanded to be stirred consistently so the oil would not separate and spoil. So these local grocers were buying these giant tubs of peanut butter from the manufacturers and were having to stir it with a wooden paddle every couple of hours or so.
It's an arm workout.
It is. And that is until, and this is where theory number 2 comes in. Theory number 2, industrialization. So, theory number 2, industrialization. In the 1920s, food scientists figured out how to stabilize peanut butter through hydrogenation, which kept oils from separating and allowed products to sit on shelves longer and travel, longer distance across the country.
And that's pretty much the moment that peanut butter really becomes an industrial food product, because the goal in manufacturing shifted from how do we make peanut butter to how do we make peanut butter cheaper, easier to mass distribute, easier to stir, longer on shelves, all of those things.
Exactly. It's like the entire business model completely shifted, and this became a more stable product that could be shipped to more grocers and manufacturers, stocked in warehouses, left on the shelves for a longer period of time. These scientists in 1920 walked so Skippy peanut butter could run later on.
Exactly. And I have another theory, Cecilia.
Hit me with it, Nathra.
All right, so theory number 3, cultural relevance. My theory brings everything together. Plant-based protein promotion, industrialization, and marketing. PB&Js, baseball games, school lunches, cartoon mascots. Peanut butter is basically emotionally tied to comfort, childhood, and Americana.
I feel like she's kind of Lana Del Rey.
She is. She's just America's sweetheart. And I think a part of why it works so well psychologically is because it's repetitive and nostalgic. It shows up in school lunches over and over again. It becomes familiar early. And once something becomes familiar and nostalgic, it starts to feel safe and even automatic.
Oh, it's like a blankie.
A blankie. So over time, it's not just a food, it's a habit, a memory, and again, an identity. And once something becomes that emotionally embedded, consumers just stop questioning it altogether.
Okay, I see this theory, like consumers stopped questioning their peanut butter purchases, leading to mass consumption, and therefore made the product unsustainable because of how much was being bought. And I think that's exactly what makes this theory so important, because what you're really describing, Nathra, is how something becomes culturally ingrained, not just popular in a trend. And I think the first theory really sets the foundation for, that childhood nostalgia before it was a pantry staple. Peanut butter was promoted as medicine by Kellogg, the cereal man. Back to the cereal man again. In these sanitariums and health institutions, he was promoting this idea that peanut butter could be used to treat the body instead of just feeding it. It was seen as a nourishment, sort of like for the first time ever.
Food is medicine. Yeah, and there's also another figure tied to peanut butter's story, not just a cereal man, and we haven't talked about him yet. Someone who not just shaped how peanuts were consumed, but basically how they were grown, and that's George Washington Carver.
George Washington Carver, another George Washington for American history. But for some quick context, George Washington Carver was born enslaved in Missouri and later trained as a botanist in Iowa in the 1890s. He later took over the Tuskegee Institute Agriculture Department of Alabama in 1896, and scholars often say his most important contribution was helping black farmers move away from the economic and ecological trap of cotton monoculture.
Up until now, we've been talking about how peanut butter was a cultural product, something shaped by marketing, memory, and behavior. But George Washington Carver was looking at something completely different. He wasn't thinking about peanut butter as a spread. He was thinking about peanuts as a crop system. Carver was working in the early 1900s in the context of soil depletion in the American South, the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, and all of that really inspired him, especially from a cotton monoculture standpoint. His work was focused on something really foundational to sustainability, which is soil health. He promoted crop rotation, specifically encouraging farmers to plant peanuts because they helped restore the nitrogen in the soil, like we mentioned earlier in the episode. So in his framing, peanuts weren't just a commodity, they were a tool for regeneration. So the same way that Kellogg saw peanuts as a healer for the body, Carver saw peanuts as a healer for the soil.
So going back to our original question here, Netra, is this the moment peanut butter becomes a sustainable product?
Not exactly, because what Carver is really describing is an ideal version of the system where peanuts are a part of a regenerative agricultural cycle, like agroforestry or permaculture or polyculture, like we were talking about. It's sustainable in a sense that it restores soil, supports farmers, and reduces dependency on a single crop like cotton. But as we know in society, people are still practicing monoculture when it comes to peanuts.
So in Carver's framework, peanuts are actually part of a solution. But that's the key distinction, because that's at the farm level. That's how peanuts grow. It doesn't account for what happens once peanuts enter the processed, industrial, mass-produced food system.
Exactly. So Carver sort of gives us a sustainable blueprint, but not the sustainable modern end product.
Right, we have the blueprint, peanuts as a regenerative crop, part of a sustainable agricultural system. But what we've also seen across this episode is that peanut butter doesn't just exist at the farm level, obviously, it's in all of our pantries. It becomes a cultural product, an industrial product, and a processed food that moves through marketing, manufacturing, and consumption systems. So that brings us back to the original question we started with. Why does sustainability matter when it comes to peanut butter? And what are the problems we are looking to solve?
At this point, we know it's not just about how peanuts are grown, it's about everything that happens after they leave the farm. So to basically unpack that full picture from agriculture to processing to demand, let's chat more with Once Again. They are again a company working to produce more ethical and sustainable peanut butter and nut butters across the spectrum. So stay tuned for our interview portion of the episode up next. At Amazon, scale means operating thousands of buildings, from the data centers that power streaming, shopping, and AI services that we rely on daily, to the fulfillment centers that process your orders. And with that scale comes responsibility. That's why Amazon is more than halfway to their goal to be water positive in their data center operations by 2030. They're innovating to reduce water use and partnering with utilities to upgrade infrastructure so they can use reclaimed wastewater in data centers. Also, the water use in their data centers is already 5 times better than the industry average. Learn more at amazon.com/sustainability. Okay, definers, have you ever wondered how a t-shirt made on the opposite side of the world can only cost $10? Or maybe you've been at the grocery store and have been thinking about how all the fruits and vegetables seem to be available no matter the season. Well, if you're in the mood for your next binge, stop what you're doing and please check out this new documentary that Cecilia and I have been loving. It's called The Chain, How the World Works, and it's available on Amazon Prime. It's brought to you by the Association for Supply Chain Management, which is a group that's basically as obsessed with the supply chain space as we are with sustainability. If there's one thing you know about us, it's that we have been kind of obsessed with the supply chain lately, as seen on our Hot Commodities series where we dive into everything from chocolate, matcha, banana, sugar. And if there's one thing that we know about you, it's that you love digging into a topic, learning how it works inside and out and picking it apart. And this is what The Chain is all about. It dives into 6 different industries, from food to fashion to medicine and sports. And it uses this how it's made storytelling approach to break down complicated topics, including real-world examples and interview with experts. Sounds familiar? It's because it's basically what we do here on the podcast. And aside from getting sucked into the stories, I just loved how much sustainability came up in so many of the episodes. Supply chain and sustainability are basically industry besties, and as you learn about how some of the most common everyday products move around the world, you'll also get to learn about how some of the ethical and environmental concerns related to these products and how they're made. Honestly, watching the episodes just sheds a whole new light on some of the topics that we love to talk about here on the podcast. So run, don't walk, and go please check out The Chain on Amazon Prime. All right, Definers, now that we've explored the journey of peanut butter from raw agricultural commodity to the product sitting in the grocery store shelves, we wanted to take a closer look at where sustainability fits into that process. From sourcing and farming practices to manufacturing and consumer expectations, there's a lot of environmental challenges and opportunities tied to the food industry today. And to better help us understand how companies are navigating those challenges, we're joined with Sudheer Kosaraju, the Chief Commercial Officer at Once Again Nut Butter. Once Again has long focused on organic ingredients, ethical sourcing, and sustainable business practices, making them the perfect company to kind of help us unpack what sustainability really looks like in the nut butter industry. So, Sudheer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Netra. Really excited to connect with you guys.
I have to ask you, Sudheer, what is your favorite nut butter? Are you a peanut butter person, almond butter?
I more lean towards cashew butter. I think there's nothing better than cashew butter on a Honeycrisp apple. But obviously, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, you can't beat that.
Yeah, I do love cashew butter. It's so creamy. And obviously, we've been focusing on peanuts and peanut butter for this episode. And like you said, with peanut butter jelly sandwiches, it feels like peanut butter is such a simple and nostalgic product. But behind every jar is this huge agricultural system and supply chain, right? What do you think consumers misunderstand about peanuts as a global commodity?
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably not a misunderstanding, but I think people see peanut butter as simple because it feels so familiar, right? Most of us grew up with it. It was in the pantry, in school lunches, on toast, in sandwiches. So there's this kind of emotional simplicity to it, right? But behind that jar is a very real agricultural system. Peanuts are affected by soil, weather, labor, food safety, transportation, storage, commodity markets, you name it. They're all so a crop where handling matters a lot. They grow underground, so soil health, when you harvest, drying and storage, all of that has an impact on quality. So it could come across as, the simple ingredient list means a very simple supply chain, but it really does. It's not. A good jar of peanut butter is really a lot of decisions that are made before it ever gets to the shelf. And from our perspective, once again, at Butter's perspective, that is where the responsibility really starts, right? Not just with what is on the label, but with how the whole system behind the label works.
Absolutely. And speaking of the label and the brand, Once Again started in the 1970s during a time when natural foods were still pretty niche. What was the original vision for the company, and how has that philosophy carried into today's food system challenges?
Yeah, we actually are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Which is pretty exciting. It started in 1976 when natural foods, as you said, were still not mainstream at all, right? It was a different time. People were asking questions that seem obvious now, right? But it was pretty unusual back then. Where does my food come from? How was it made? Can a business grow and still sort of treat people, farmers, and communities the right way? So those are all questions that are asked today and seem pretty intuitive, but back then it was a little bit of an unusual approach to take. And the original vision was really pretty simple, right? Make honest food, make it with care, build the business around values, not just volume. And 50 years later, that still matters today, perhaps even more, because the food system is faster, more consolidated, and obviously quite a lot more complicated. But the question is still the same: can people trust what they're eating? And for once again, that means, we've always kind of done this: simple ingredients, responsible sourcing, organic options, strong food safety, and long-term supplier relationship. The world, has changed quite a lot since the company started in these 5 decades, but our basic philosophy has not really changed. Good food should be good for people, and it should be made in a way that respects the system around it. And long before any fair trade certifications, etc., existed, once again has really taken pride in producing products in the most ethical way possible and engaging in fair trade practices. As an example, we introduced the very first organic peanut butter in the US in 1979.
That is wild.
Yeah, by establishing like organic growing standards, and we later introduced organic Valencia peanut butter to support farmer stability and fair pricing. All of that laid the groundwork for innovation in the category. And then in 2007, we brought the first no-stir organic peanut butter market. So not only have we been innovative in terms of products, but also innovative in terms of sustainable practices and making sure that we're taking good care of people, planet, and also our products. That has been part of our DNA for a long while. And another token of that is Oregon Tilth, our organic certifier. We're celebrating 25 years of organic certification with them, right? Not many brands out there that can talk to that. I'm quite proud to be part of this company.
Absolutely. It's hard to find companies that are strict and on the same route of their original mission. It's interesting to see that once again was started in the 1970s, also coinciding with the first Earth Day that happened in 1970, and that huge movement that took place that basically revolutionized the environmental movement in the United States. So I love to see that in a time where, companies like Everlane are being bought out by Shein, and a lot of consumers are skeptical to see if companies are actually aligned. It's great to see that once again is celebrating those big milestones and anniversaries. Another really interesting fact about once again is that you're employee owned, which is relatively rare in the food industry. As we've been sort of diving deep into the peanut supply chain and a lot of the challenges around labor and inequity, and the dark history of peanuts, this brings me hope. And can you explain to the listeners how that ownership structure changes the way decisions get made, especially around sourcing, sustainability, and long term investments?
That phrase, long-term investment, I think that is kind of the key to things, right? Because employee ownership really changes how people think about time. When the employees that we have are the owners, you are not only asking, what is the cheapest or fastest decision right now, you're also asking, is this good for the company long term? Is it good for the people who work here? Is it good for our suppliers, our customers, our growers? All of them sort of depend on us. And that matters, I think, in food a lot, because a lot of the right decisions are not instant payback decisions. A lot of other brands have used co-manufacturers. But we've always kind of relied on having strong supplier relationships, making our own product, and those supplier relationships, they take time. Organic certification takes discipline. Food safety systems take investment, and sustainability work, it just takes patience, right? You don't always see the return immediately, but over time, it makes the company stronger. It also changes the culture, right? Quality is not just a department, sustainability is not just a marketing word. People care because they have a stake in the outcome. And but that does not mean every decision is easy. We still have to run a disciplined business. But employee ownership gives a company a longer view and the people a passion and commitment for what they're producing and how they do that. That can't help but show up in the product on the shelves, in our relationships with our consumers.
And I'm sure your employees are very environmentally driven in their own sense, given the mission of the company. And in today's society, climate change and the climate crisis is very prevalent. It's very on the hearts of a lot of the younger generation, and it's reshaping agriculture across the globe. What kind of climate pressures do you see are being placed on the industry and peanut farmers, and how is that affecting your work?
I think the operating word here really is the unpredictability of it all, right? So peanut farmers are dealing with a lot more unpredictability. That is probably the simplest way to say it. Peanuts can be a resilient crop, but they're still very sensitive to timing. Too little rain at the wrong time can hurt yield and quality. Too much rain near harvest can create other problems. Heat and drought can also increase food safety risks, including aflatoxin, which is a serious concern in peanuts. So climate change is not some distant issue for the peanut industry. It is very practical. It affects quality, cost, supply, and farmer livelihoods. The industry is interestingly responding in a lot of ways: better seed varieties, smarter irrigation, better soil practices, more testing, closer collaboration across the supply chain. And for once again, it really reinforces why you cannot manage sourcing from like a spreadsheet alone. You need relationships, you need communication, you need to understand what farmers and processors and shellers and suppliers are dealing with in the real world. And I feel like that's where we really shine in building those longer term relationships.
Yeah, and you mentioned those long-term relationships and that long-term thinking, even when you talked about employee ownership. Why does that relationship building matter in a commodity where companies are often just chasing the lowest price? And how are you ensuring that your suppliers are actually meeting your standards? Like, do you have someone on the ground? Do you do constant site visits? That's something that I'm really interested in as a consumer of your product.
We source our peanuts from Argentina and in the US also, and we have constant interactions with them. We visit the farms, we visit the shellers, and there is ongoing quality testing at every step of the way, and we're always interacting with the farmers and the growers to make sure that the growing practices are how we're agreeing to proceed with them. And so there is this constant interaction, a lot of back and forth, a lot of visits to different parts of the supply chain, constantly to make sure that we are bringing really the best possible ingredients into our plants. And then inside the plants, there's constant monitoring from both the SQF perspective, but just also an ongoing sampling and quality management perspective to make sure that the product that goes into our jars and through the supply chain to show up on the shelf for the consumer, it is the absolute best product that we can put in front of the consumer.
So, when it comes to monitoring the product and that quality control that you mentioned, what are those things that you're looking for specifically in the product or just along the supply chain? I know you mentioned a certain toxin,
Aflatoxin?
aflatoxin.
Yeah. So broadly, we're always kind of looking at in our growing practices how it interacts with the soil health, crop rotation, et cetera, et cetera. As I mentioned, aflatoxin, it's a chemical made by certain molds, and it can grow on crops like corn, peanut, various tree nuts, spices, etc. Especially when crops are sort of stressed by heat, drought, or insects and poor storage moisture. It's not the mold itself, but it's a toxin produced by the mold, and you cannot reliably verify it by like looking at it or smelling or tasting. We do quite a lot of testing at various stages of the supply chain just to make sure that contamination is really below any levels that are impactful for human health and so forth.
Right. What a lot of people don't understand about peanuts in their agriculture is they're like a root. They actually grow underground. So that makes them more susceptible to absorbing various things in the soil that have already existed, pesticides, chemicals. It's great to know that that testing is very locked down for you all.
It is extremely important that the consumers, when they open the jar, they have nothing that they need to be worried about. And, the entire company is very squarely focused on that, from, the growing all the way to the transportation out into the retailers. So, yeah, that's an extremely important thing for us.
What you said is so true, right? It's something that consumers are being more aware of. It's extremely important for us to be wondering and questioning and curious about what's going into our bodies. And oftentimes we've been seeing an uptick in price when it comes to products that are doing these certifications. How do you find the resistance to the price point of your product? Because if you look at like a great value branded peanut butter, it's going to be about $2 versus a product like yours, which is going to be maybe a percentage higher than that.
What we focus on is to fill that need state where consumers are really looking for very clean ingredient, simple ingredient list, quality, reliability, and consistency, and the comfort when it comes to knowing that the product that they're purchasing is great tasting and has been made with the highest quality and also environmental and ethical standards. So that is sort of the need state that we try to fulfill. There definitely is pressure when it comes to cost of goods and looking for the best quality ingredients and making sure that the certifications are all taken care of on a consistent basis. But that is really the promise that once again is making to the consumer is that, hey, when you buy our product, you really don't have to worry about anything other than how delicious the product is.
Right. And a lot of brands do things differently, including the ingredients that they put inside of their products. Peanut butter is one of those foods people assume only has a few ingredients, but there can actually be a huge difference between brands. What separates a more responsibly made peanut butter from like a more conventional one?
Ingredient list matters, but it's really not the whole answer. A responsible peanut butter starts with the peanut, as we talked about, how is it grown? How is it handled? Organic, how is it roasted, what kind of testing and food safety systems are behind it, and then you kind of look at what gets added or does not get added. Is the product being kept close to the source, or is it being engineered to be cheaper, sweeter, more shelf stable? And once again, we believe peanut butter should be simple, but simple does not mean casual. It takes a lot of discipline to make a simple product well. As I mentioned before, we ethically source our peanuts from the US, Argentina, Nicaragua, and have full traceability back to the farmers and nut processors. This allows us to ensure that from an environmental and social integrity in perspective, it's all on the up and up through all steps of the supply chain. And from a manufacturing perspective, we make them in our own dedicated SKF certified facility We have a robust quality assurance program and state-of-the-art labor labs to monitor internal practices. Also, conventional peanut butter can absolutely be safe and affordable, and affordability matters. But a more responsible product always asks the bigger question, right? Did the company create value in a way that respects the farmer, the employee, the land, along with product quality and safety for the consumer? And that's sort of the real difference, right? That goes beyond simple ingredient list.
Right. And we talked about ingredients, we talked about the supply chain, soil health. What are some innovations or shifts happening in the peanut butter or peanut agriculture industry that consumers might not know yet?
It sort of starts with the agriculture, right? Soil health, water use, crop rotation, pesticide use, how much energy is being used, how do you transport, packaging, all of those things matter. And our partners are constantly working to reshape how those things are leveraged to constantly overcome any of the challenges, whether it is from environmental changes or changes in consumer demands. So they're always very focused on that. And then on the social side, it is farmer economics, labor practices, and transparency. Commodity markets create a lot of pressure on lower costs, as we've talked about. And when costs are pushed too hard, someone upstream usually carries that burden. That could be the farmer, it could be the worker, it could be the community. And then, in terms of the trends, I think the consumers are obviously much more knowledgeable and getting more knowledgeable by the day. They're not just asking whether something is natural, or is it organic certified. They're asking who made it, where it came from, what the company stands for, and whether they can trust it. And at the same time, people are under pressure financially, so we cannot talk about sustainability in a way that makes food feel elitist. The real challenge is raising standards while keeping good food accessible. And I think that really is what is going to be the focus when it comes to how you think about peanut butter and the innovation around peanut butter across the supply chain.
If listeners were to finish this episode and only remember one thing about peanuts or peanut butter, what do you hope it is?
There is a whole ecosystem and supply chain across the globe that, once again, is proud to be a part of, that is working very hard to make sure that we bring you the best, the most delicious, full of plant protein, healthy fats, in snack that you can have. That's probably the one thing that I would ask your listeners to walk away from this.
Okay.
Yeah, you can tell I'm really proud of the work we do.
Yes.
And proud of the products that we make.
All right, diviners, you heard it here. So high protein, satiating snack, and don't forget about all of the factors and supply chains and water and emissions that go into growing this beautiful product that once again is putting out. And we like to ask all of our guests on the podcast this one question, that if you were at a party and you wanted to wow somebody with a fact, whether it's about peanuts or once again, or whatever it is, what would you say?
The peanut travels something like 10,000 miles before it makes into your peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I don't know if that impresses anybody in
Impresses me.
parties, but I found that to be pretty impressive, especially as we think about the products that we make and the complex supply chains that we manage.
Another question I had for you, Sudheer, was the really cute raccoon logo on the packaging. I personally love raccoons. They're integral to the ecosystem. They get a bad reputation. Can you tell us the story behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's Rocky Roo. She has been our mascot for several decades. As the lore goes, when the factory was started, it was in sort of the woodlands of Finger Lakes region of New York. And our factory employees found these raccoon babies stealing into the factory premises and feeding on some of the nut butters they were trying to steal. So they said, well, that's not, appropriate from a quality perspective, but they love nut butters so much, we're going to adopt them and raise them on nut butters.
That's so cute. So she just got unlimited access to the Once Again nut butters. What a life. That's a wonderful life for a raccoon.
Yeah, and she has been proudly maintained on our packaging ever since. Our company is really in love with her, and we try to use it in all of our consumer communications.
That's a lovely story, Sudhir. I'm also curious for the definers listening who want to get their hands on Once Again. Where can they find it?
Yeah, we are in a lot of the independent natural grocery stores, and also at Whole Foods and Sprouts across the nation. And you can buy them at onceagain.com or any other e-com vendors as well.
That's amazing. I have to tell you a funny story. I was in my bodega just 2 weeks ago. I live in New York City, and I saw the Once Again tahini on the shelf, and I was very happy. So I'm excited for some of the definers out there listening to give it a try. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast and for your insights into the world of nuts and nut butter and just your commitment as a company to sustainable and ethical standards. We love to have that type of representation on the podcast.
Thank you, Netra. Thank you for your interest in Once Again. And we're a big fans of Sustainability Defined. So I'm super thrilled to be on.
Thanks for tuning in to our 100th episode, Definers. We're so thankful for you over a decade now listening to us yap and make bad jokes.
Woohoo, 100. Shout out to all the definers. Thank you for listening. It means so much to us that, you're willing to learn about all these sustainability topics and define them with us. If you ever have any thoughts, comments, concerns, or silly sustainable moments that you want to share with us, DM us at Sustainability Defined on Instagram and LinkedIn, or email us on our website at www.sustainabilitydefined.com.
And thank you to Once Again for joining us. And Definers, next time you open a jar of peanut butter or any nut butter, remember, it's not just a snack, it's a part of a bigger system, and one that connects farmers, land use, climate, and consumer demands in ways that most of us never see. I'm your host, Nathra.
And I'm your host, Cecilia. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.